They say that talking to yourself is a sign of insanity. But I think that's only if you answer back. Right? Right. This is Talking to Myself, the art advice podcast where I use anecdotes from my life and my current mental condition to try to make myself a better artist and hopefully a better person. Hopefully other people can also get something from this, but really I'm just trying to avoid paying for therapy. Today on the podcast, I thought we'd talk about dependence and interdependence and being a loner. It will surprise no one to learn that I am pretty much an introvert. I like to do things on my own. I like to kind of not depend on anyone else for anything. And situations like the current situation we have in the world right now, where everyone's trying to stay home and stay isolated, is really not that different from my normal state of being. I have friends that I see socially, and I talk to people at work. I'm relatively friendly for such an introvert person, but I don't make other people a large part of my life for whatever reason. Then there are lots of reasons, but I don't think too much about the reasons. It's just kind of the way I've always been. And I'm pretty sure my dad is the same way. Last time I visited him, he showed me a barn that he'd built by himself. Now that's odd. I don't know if you guys are familiar with building a barn, but generally it's a more than one person operation. But he got some machinery, drove the foundation poles into the ground, climbed up and fixed himself some struts, and laid in a roof by himself, which is admirable, I suppose. I mean, it is impressive. It's also dangerous and generally unnecessary. I mean, where I'm from, even if you don't have any money, you can usually get some friends to help you make something if you need to. Something that big. I mean, we're not from Amish country. It's not like we have barn raisings or anything like that, but you really shouldn't have to build a barn by yourself. That's just kind of Dad's way. And I suppose it's mine too. Now, how do I turn this back around to art? What that means to me in art is that I don't generally collaborate. I mean, surprise, surprise. I have in the past collaborated, and a lot of the things I do for actual money in the world of art are strictly for hire work, which means I'm collaborating with someone else, producing their own idea. Usually comic book work, working with a writer. I'll take their script and I'll either do the pencils and the inks or the whole thing, pencil, inks, colors. But I mean, it's always been more of a work for hire situation where we're not bouncing ideas off each other and coming up with something between us. I'm just sort of taking their blueprint and making what they asked me to make. So it's not exactly the same thing as working with someone. Again, this like most of these podcasts is going to be me talking to myself and trying to understand things I may not be doing optimally in my life. I think this might be one of them. This current isolation state that everyone's in because of this pandemic we're in. I know I said I wasn't going to bring it up again, but I'm bringing it up again because it's still happening. Other people in the world who aren't as independent as I am, or as independent as I think I am, are being forced into a situation where they have to be independent if they want to continue to make work artistically. Now, a lot of artwork, of course, is singular process stuff. Most painters don't require someone's input to make a painting. Musicians don't always need other musicians or anything else. Comic books, you can make a comic on your own. It's not that difficult. It's just really time consuming, and a lot of people have time now, but it's easier to do that kind of thing with some people, to split up the work or to bounce ideas off of. And that's really the idea as far as collaboration goes with artwork that I'd like to see myself do more of. That's the part where I'm talking to myself and trying to convince myself a better way to do things might be to be more open to collaboration. I have a lot of ideas. I have a lot of interesting ideas to me, and I have a lot of ideas for projects that I'd be happy to turn into stuff. I'd like to make these things. But because it's just me, one of the problems is I have to convince myself that it's worth doing. And when you have occasionally crippling self-doubt, that's difficult. Were I to be involved in a collaboration with someone else, they could at least chime in. If the ideas seem to have merit to them, they could chime in and go, hey, no, that's a good idea. You should probably do something with that. Let's do something with that. And that would be kind of the impetus you would need to keep going. Instead of just sitting around going, is it a good enough idea? Do I need to invest time in this? Is this something that's going to work out for me? Am I going to be wasting my time like I usually do? Because otherwise you just get to the end and you're like, oh, I just wasted my time again. And it just reinforces your negativity and self-doubt, which I have a lot of. So, future self, I know you don't listen to this podcast, but hopefully you remember making it. Collaborations don't necessarily mean the two of you come up with an idea between the two of you that's yours, both of yours, and you make it. It might mean that you bounce ideas off someone else and they help you make it better, or they even just convince you that it's worth making in the first place. That is all valid. That is all important. And that's something that you need, future self, to consider and maybe reach out to do. I know it seems odd that I would take a situation where everyone's being forced to stay in their homes to consider interacting more with people than I usually do. And this is just the way I do things whenever it's the most difficult. But because people are more isolated and because people are probably bored, I think there might be a great time for that kind of thing. Because we have the internet. We can communicate with people. We have time. Some of us have time to work on things like that we might not normally have time for. Unfortunately, my current situation, my job is considered essential, so nothing's really changed as far as how much time I have, except that I seem to have less of it than normal. But rest assured, I manage to squander what little time I have, as always. So, what I'm thinking about doing, and this is not a declaration of intent, this is not a way to publicly shame myself later if I don't accomplish this. This is just me just spitballing an idea here. I think I might try to contact some people and start some kind of critique group online. Art critique group. Or maybe just a creative critique group. Where people can look at each other's projects, maybe help them find out what needs to be done, what's good, what's bad, what would make things better, like a critique group would do. I briefly was involved in one of these a few years ago here, and it was pretty good. But then the founder moved out of the country, and we didn't keep it up. But if we started out online during this crisis thing, we can probably maintain it easier. If you just turn it into something where maybe a forum, or maybe just shoot videos back and forth to each other, or even just emails or something like that. Live video chat would be great, but you don't have to do that. Even for something like visual art, you can just send pictures back and forth. I think that kind of thing would be really helpful to me, because even though I've got projects that I want to do this year, that I was planning to do this year, it may or may not happen now because of the pandemic, but I'd like to do them, but I want to make them better than my normal quality of work. And the only way to step that up is going to be to involve other people. As weird and not distasteful, but strange that is to me. But anyway, that's what I'm going to try to do, hopefully. This is current self, being optimistic. Later on, future self might be not so much, but at least we try. And that's what this whole podcast is about, me trying to figure out things to make myself better. Hopefully that helps you too. Thanks everybody for listening. Especially want to thank my patrons on Patreon. You guys are making this podcast worthwhile for me, and hopefully it's worthwhile for you. And you are the shiniest people I know. Everybody stay safe, stay healthy, tell your friends and family that you love them, and I will see you guys next time.